Could Democrats get into trouble on tariffs? So far, criticism has mostly been directed at President Trump on the issue. Critics on the left say he's tanking the economy. But editor-in-chief of the Lever, David Sirota, recently suggested the tariff issue isn't binary, that there is in fact a middle ground.
He points out, through all the bickering between Republicans and Democrats over trade policies, policies that satisfy both can coexist. Joining us now to break this all down is David Sirota, founder and editor-in-chief of The Lever. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know there's been a lot of talk over comparing old Democrat statements on tariffs to what they're saying now about Trump's tariffs. What is the potential middle ground to sort of get those maybe 10-year-ago Democrats aligned with the 2025 Trump?
Well, we don't have to look very far for what a rational trade policy is. Joe Biden, the Biden administration, put forward a pretty rational trade policy using select and targeted tariffs in conjunction with a larger industrial policy of investment in the United States to create a much more rational trade policy than the NAFTA-style trade model. A NAFTA-style trade model, by the way, that Joe Biden himself had previously supported. So Biden has evolved on the issue, and the proof is in the pudding. There was a very significant beginning of a growth in manufacturing jobs in the last few years of Biden's presidency, in conjunction with things like the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and again, those targeted tariffs. So Democrats don't have to look that far back to see a model that works. And I think the trap here is that Trump wants to bait them into being against all tariffs. He wants to bait them into being the party of NAFTA, of the China free trade deal, which destroyed so much of America's industrial heartland. So Trump is trying to use trade policy and a trade war as his culture war. And he wants Democrats, in my view, to take the bait and position themselves as the pro-NAFTA party. But it's not a binary. The Democrats can be a party that says, listen, Donald Trump is using tariffs badly. He is mismanaging the economy. He is not using the tools at his disposal appropriately, and what he's doing is harming the working class. They can say all that without saying, we are the party of NAFTA. We are the party that believes all tariffs are bad. That's not what this binary has to be.
And your fear, presumably, is that if Democrats do get painted into that particular corner, David, it will add to or accelerate the problems that Democrats are having with working class voters as it is, for unrelated reasons.
Right. I mean, I think that's the potential danger for the Democratic Party. Let's look at what happened after NAFTA. After NAFTA passed, some of the most Democratic districts in the country quickly became some of the most Republican districts in the country. That as the Democrats became perceived as the party of tariff-free trade, unfettered free trade, although I don't like using that word because these free trade deals are free trade when it comes to labor and the environment. There are all sorts of protectionist policies in these trade policies for corporations, IP rights, copyrights, and the like. So as Democrats became portrayed as the party, what we should accurately call, of corporate written trade policies, the Republicans were able to win more with more and more working class constituencies to great effect. The industrial heartland of the country is many of them are red states now, states that had been blue states, and I think that's what Trump is hoping happens once again. I don't think it has to happen. I think the damage that Trump is doing with his bad and reckless across the board tariff policies, the inconsistency and the like, is going to likely create so much economic pain that I don't think he's going to be able to rekindle an anti-NAFTA argument that kind of nets out as a positive for the Republicans when it comes to voters who are experiencing a tough and even tougher economy. But I guess the point is, there's an effort to try, I think, from the pro-NAFTA side of the Democratic Party to use and weaponize Trump's bad tariff policy to try to purge the party of those who have been critics of the old trade policy. And a lot of those critics, I should add, are from places in the country, are the last remaining Democrats who represent those swing districts, those working class districts that Democrats used to dominate in.
Yeah, and I mean, one of those people that immediately comes to mind is Governor Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, who met with Trump recently and has released a statement on the tariffs saying that she does agree with the general principle but opposes the way that Trump is going about it. Same with Senator Bernie Sanders. How do you think people in that camp who have been more critical of the implementation of the tariff policy can get other members of the Democratic Party on board with where they're at?
It's a great question, and I'm not sure. I think that, look, we live in an era where the media environment, the social media environment, represents binary or rewards binary polarization. Tariffs are all good, tariffs are all bad. What Trump is doing is awful, or what Democrats are doing are awful. In this situation, there's a more, I think, nuanced argument to make, which is, again, Trump is not using the tools properly. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If a tariff is a hammer, you can use a hammer to build or you can use a hammer to destroy. Trump is using the hammer to destroy, but it doesn't mean that there's no way to use the hammer as part of a larger policy to help build. And again, I go back to the Biden administration. Now, some people may hear this and roll their eyes. Oh, you're saying Democrats should tout the Biden administration. You know, Joe Biden and the Biden administration was essentially, at least the extension of Kamala Harris, removed from office. Well, the Biden administration, let's be honest, did a terrible job of actually selling what they were doing. They did not do a good job of making a public campaign case for how the tariffs were helping rebuild manufacturing. And a lot of that goes back to, I think, a point that it's not a very interesting point. It doesn't get a lot of speculation because it's sort of an open and shut, obvious point to make, which is that they didn't, part of the reason they didn't do a good job of selling that is because Joe Biden was extremely old. He was clearly declining in political skills, and they insisted on having sort of a bad or kind of over-the-hill salesman, pitchman, at the top of the ticket. So all those things colluded to have Biden not really sell this policy, even though the industrial policy of the Biden administration, again, those targeted tariffs, ended up being some of the most successful parts of his presidential term.
David Sirota, Editor-in-Chief of The Lever, thanks for joining us on Rising.
Thanks to both of you.
Coming up, are young Americans becoming less religious? We'll get into that next.